Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for the Food, Agriculture, and Water Innovation Session. My name is Jason Evans, and I'm an Associate Professor of Agricultural Business Management and the Director of the Institute for Rural Vitality at SUNY Cobleskill. I'm going to be your moderator for the next hour. So our Institute for Rural Vitality at SUNY Cobleskill encompasses a number of different centers and initiatives, including the Mohawk Valley Farm and Food Business Incubator, which helps us to cultivate farm and food-centric businesses and leverage the region's considerable natural resources to support economic development. This session is part of the NISTAR Innovation Asset Showcase, which is focusing on a number of different high-tech industry clusters and highlighting key capabilities and innovations in New York State, with a focus on how companies can leverage the robust R&D ecosystem supported by Empire State Development's Division of Science, Technology, and Innovation, also known as NISTAR. New York's vast natural assets helped earn its Empire State nickname. Our rich farmland has long supported a strong agribusiness sector, and our waterways have proved major strategic advantages for economic vitality. It's natural that New York's abundant fresh water have positioned the state to play a leading national role in addressing the complex challenges of water resource management, infrastructure, and protection. On that topic, we'll be hearing from the NISTAR-supported Center of Excellence in Healthy Water Solutions, which is based at Clarkson University and SUNY ESF. And we'll hear from the Center of Excellence in Food and Agriculture Innovation at Cornell, which is actively growing the state's food, beverage, and agriculture-related economy. We're also pleased to have two companies represented on the panel, Halamine and DMAX Plaza, that are great examples of innovation in these fields. Before we get started in our panel discussion, just a couple of housekeeping matters for everyone participating. Please submit your questions in the Q&A function, that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. So about a half an hour into our panel discussion, I'll actually remind you to begin putting questions into the Q&A. I have several questions already laid out for each of the panelists, and once we get through those, we'll then turn to the questions that you've put into the Q&A. So don't forget to use the Q&A for your questions when the time comes. Your mics are muted and chat is disabled, so Q&A is basically the only way that you can communicate with us. So I'm going to get started by having each of our panelists quickly introduce themselves so that you know who's who, and I'll call them by name and they can make their own introduction. So we'll start with Ted.
Hi, I'm Ted Avala, the CEO of Halamine. Halamine is a Cornell-based startup that's working on antimicrobial coatings, and I've been CEO for about 1.5 years.
Great, thanks, Ted. Stefan?
Hi, I'm Stefan Grimberg. I'm a professor at Clarkson University in Environmental Engineering, but I'm also the co-director of the Center for Excellence in Healthy Water Solutions.
Great. Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Young. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture at Cornell Agritech. Cornell is the state's land-grant university. It's heavily involved in agriculture and food innovation, research, and development, and we help many companies be able to succeed.
Great, thank you. And finally, Selma.
I'm Selma Taggart, and I'm a professor of chemical engineering at Clarkson University, but I'm also co-founder of DMX Plasma that I'm going to talk about a bit later. We produce cutting-edge reactors for water treatment.
Great, thank you all. And we'll get started with our panel questions. And the first couple of questions are for Stefan. First, what are the most pressing water issues that your Center of Excellence and its private sector partners are tackling at this point?
So the center is in its first year of existence, and for that first year, we are primarily focusing on two-ish primary issues. One is to look at treatment of emerging contaminants, such as PFAS, and Selma is going to talk about very much in detail about that. And then the other one is focusing on primary nutrients like the fate of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, which enter into waterways and then cause, for example, harmful algae blooms. So
Great. So in general, what technologies are under development or being piloted to address those issues?
So for the emerging contaminants, so there's 2 PFAS technologies being piloted at Clarkson or within this center umbrella at this point. One is the plasma technology. Selma will talk more in detail about that from DMX Plasma, which essentially destroys PFAS very effectively through plasma technology. And the other technology is using ultrasonic processes in situ in wells with the company Remwell. So this is led by Dr. Crimi at Clarkson University. So those are 2 technologies which are piloted at several field sites in the country of seeing how effective those technologies is for PFAS contamination. In terms of the nutrient removal, we have worked over the last year looking at developing technologies for mitigating harmful algae blooms. So this is an emergency response for small harmful algae blooms where SUNY ESF together with Roundball company is developing a process to ultimately using cavitation to destroy cyanobacteria in lakes. And then Clarkson has worked on electrochemical oxidation principles destroying cyanobacteria and cyanotoxins in lakes. And so those systems have been field tested over the last, on a pilot scale, the last several months. And so we are looking at the data right now and seeing how we can develop them further, these technologies. And then lastly, in terms of the sensor technology, one of our faculty members has developed a low-cost sensor for nutrient analysis or for phosphorus analysis. And so that would help actually manage watersheds a lot more effectively because the cost of analytical sensing becomes cost prohibitive when we look at large watersheds. And so we can, if we have a cheap sensor, we can ultimately manage those watersheds a lot easier as using essentially citizen science. And so that's another technology development.
Great. So I do have a quick follow-up just so that everybody's on the same page. Not that you're not, but just so that everybody's on the same page. PFAS, what is that?
Oh, thank you. So these are chemical polyfluorinated compounds, which are essentially used as fire retardants in foams. And so these are chemicals which become very toxic at very low concentrations, and they're very abundant everywhere in a lot of our groundwaters at this point.
Okay. I promise I won't do this to all of the panelists all the time, but I do have a second follow-up for you, Stefan. To what extent is non-point source pollution from agricultural production the culprit with nutrient loading?
So that depends obviously on the location. And so I think in our state, we have a lot of watersheds or water bodies being impacted by agricultural land, I think in general. And so, and obviously we have another potential source of nutrients which are discharged from wastewater treatment plants. In very sensitive watersheds, the limits for treatment for wastewater treatments is already regulated very heavily, and often that becomes not the limiting factor essentially in for those sensitive watersheds. And so it becomes more important to actually look at those non-point source pollutions, which are mainly agricultural runoffs. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much. I will now move over to Selma for a minute. Selma, your company, DMAX Plaza, develops cutting-edge water purification solutions. Tell us briefly about the technology and what your most promising markets and/or applications are.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we are a small startup company. We are a spin-off from Clarkson University, where the technology was originally developed. So we essentially build chemical reactors that are based on electrical discharge plasma to degrade this PET and polyfluoroalkyl substances, abbreviated as PFAS, in water. So Stefan briefly mentioned, and if I may add a bit more, that PFAS are really notoriously toxic compounds that, shockingly are present in the blood of almost every American. And they, owe their property, owe their existence to their unique properties. They are very hydrophobic, they repel water. So they have been incorporated in our daily lives through, water, resistant jackets, microwave, popcorn bags, Teflon primarily. So they're pretty much everywhere. So what we have actually discovered is that, by accident, if I may add, is that plasmas are really, really effective at degrading these compounds in water. So now we have actually went from bench scale all the way to the pilot scale reactor development. We've demonstrated our system in the field. It was the first actually PFAS treatment technology that was demonstrated in the field last year, in fact, in September. And our technology, it appears so far, that is the most effective technology available to degrade these compounds, because they're degraded rapidly within minutes in a flow-through system of few gallons, which is really, really significantly better to, compared to where our competitors are right now. So, our market target is really a multi-billion-dollar market. We are targeting primarily U.S. Air Force, U.S. military in general, to destroy this aqueous film-forming foams, abbreviated as AFFF. So they're fire suppressants. They contain PFAS. So that's our primary target. The next target is U.S. industries, which are still heavily involved in manufacturing of PFAS. And finally, down the line, municipal water, because we want to, end PFAS there before it comes to the consumer.
Great. So those industries that have used PFAS as part of their manufacturing process, has public concern over PFAS-related pollution caused any change in those industries in terms of how they're using those inputs, or is it still very heavily used?
Yes, I think that companies have largely responded to the concern of the public. They have agreed to stop producing these two notorious compounds called PFOA and PFOS. They are the main concern the public had. They have actually switched to analogs of these compounds. Not to go into too much chemistry, they went from shorter chain PFAS to longer chain PFAS. but the concern remains the same. So they're still problematic. There's still PFAS in water. I'm not going to say it's masked as different PFAS, but yes, there's still PFAS in water. It's still a global problem.
Got it. So how have the resources at the Center of Excellence in Healthy Water Solutions helped you advance your company's goals?
So I think they have been instrumental in allowing us to use state-of-the-art equipment to actually analyze PFAS before and after the treatment. So the CARE Center at Clarkson University, which is also part of the Water Solutions Center, is a DoD certified lab, a credible lab, which actually has, I've been told, the best equipment in the country to actually analyze for PFAS. So we have been utilizing, their resources as much as we can. And I think that a large part of our success is really owed to the CARE Center at Clarkson University, because without the proper analysis to analyze for PFAS in water, that would really impede our success. So it's mainly through the access to analytical equipment.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And now to Catherine for a bit. Catherine, what trends are you seeing in the types of startups that you serve, in particular categories of food, beverage, and other agricultural products?
Well, thank you, Jason. And it's a very exciting time for food, beverage, and agricultural industries because there are so many trends that are being driven by innovation, research, and technology. Consumers are demanding safe, fresh, and local, and oftentimes food or beverages that tell a story. So while many people may have grabbed those comfort foods from and stocked up, from processed foods during the beginning of the pandemic and grabbed those Oreos, most consumers are demanding more of a concept that food is medicine and that what you put into your body affects your health. And so clean label is a big trend where food products are being produced with fewer ingredients, no preservatives, no artificial colorings, and good nutrition. Another trend has to do with plant-based foods. And we see companies trending toward meat replacement. So for example, a company that we've been working with extensively is Leap Foods, and they grow in a controlled environment, high-value mushrooms that are used, for example, in burgers. So it might be 30% ground beef and the rest of it is mushrooms. And so it's reducing the meat consumption and improving people's health. Another company that we just began working with is Bright Life, and they produce dairy-free products such as yogurts and cheeses that are made from things such as cashews or soy. And I want to point out that both of those companies are finalists in this year's Grow New York competition. And so it'll be interesting to see how they fare as we move through the process. Other trends include fermented beverages that include things like probiotics. And I'll talk about a company that we've been working with called Spare Foods in just a moment. But hemp is big, and we've been working with a company named Seedly that includes hemp seeds. CBD companies are still emerging in New York State, and the Center of Excellence is working with some of those. And home delivered meals are trending. They were trending before COVID-19, but they're more popular than ever. So one example is Real Eats that is based in Geneva, and they produce convenient home delivered meals that are very nutritious. And they were, coming on, they were the $1 million winner in Grow New York last year. But their sales now have really skyrocketed because consumers are concerned about things like, maybe they don't want to go out in public to shop, or they just want that to know that the food that they're consuming is safe. And so we see that as a big trend. And food safety and sanitation are as compelling as ever, especially with the pandemic. So you see companies like Halamine, and I'm glad that Ted has joined us today since that's a Cornell generated technology. But we've been working with other companies too that can sanitize surfaces or air or water systems. And on the ag side, we also see a great deal of innovation. Sensors, drones, and autonomous vehicles now are helping to solve labor issues, for example, for growers and farmers. So one company we've been dealing with is Blue White Robotics, BWR. It's a company from Israel that has established a presence in central New York. And they're using drones in conjunction with Dropcopter, another Grow New York winner, last year to pollinate orchards. But they can outfit tractors and other farm equipment to operate autonomously. And one final company we're dealing with from the innovation standpoint is AgVoice. They were in Grow New York last year, and we've been working with them. They're actually moving the company from Georgia to New York State, and it's kind of the Alexa of the food and ag industry because people want to be hands-free and also collect data. And so this is a way to capture data hands-free and be able to utilize it more effectively to increase your productivity or, your effectiveness. So it's, I could go on, but it's just a really, as I said, a really exciting time. And we're seeing so much research, innovation, and technology emerge now.
Great. And by the way, for our participants, I do see the questions popping up in the Q&A, and I promise we will get to those once we get through our initial round of panelist questions. So keep sending them. Catherine, you mentioned, and this is an extra for you, you mentioned a lot of innovation in the plant-based product development world, which to some extent competes directly with the dairy industry and dairy products. Is there equivalent innovation happening in the dairy industry so that dairy remains viable in the long run?
Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of innovation in dairy that we're very excited about. New York State is the yogurt capital of the country. For example, Greek yogurt is heavily produced here. One of the companies we're working with is the Spare Food Company, and they are very small and a startup, but they're heavily focused on taking what previously was considered as waste from food products and making them into delicious meals. So they had the idea to take acid whey. Acid whey can be a huge, and the people from Clarkson know this, that this can be a huge environmental issue. If it's not addressed, it's a major cost for Greek yogurt companies to address acid whey. And so we've worked heavily with them through our food science program, our pilot plant, to develop a delicious beverage that we'll be launching soon that takes that waste product, that acid whey, and turns it into a healthy, probiotic rich, nutrient rich, very delicious beverage. And so I think that there's a lot going on. We still need dairy. I grew up in a dairy farm, so that's near and dear to my heart. And we are promoting dairy products also, especially on the Ithaca campus, but we're working heavily in that space also. So, there are opportunities across the board, and dairy still is an important key industry in New York and also important in the food system.
Great. And briefly, Catherine, what institutional resources, facilities, and expertise do food and beverage businesses leverage at the Center of Excellence?
Well, at Agritech, we are a development hub and we provide research, innovation, and technology for food and agriculture. So we help companies succeed, and it's everything from helping growers and businesses thrive. Our expertise spans from craft beverage to food processing and safety, pest and disease management, and also developing and breeding new crops. So, for example, we just released 3 new apples. Dr. Susan Brown developed those, Cordera, Pink Luster, and Firecracker. And they join really delicious apples that were developed and launched last year, such as Snapdragon. But we have many food entrepreneurs out there, and our experts bring their vision to reality with state-of-the-art equipment, scientific expertise, and out-of-the-box solutions. So we have the pilot plant, for example, which is a huge food processing and preservation innovation hub. And it has almost every kind of food processing piece of equipment that you can imagine. So when I take startups there, it's like they've gone to Disney World because they can experiment there. We do product development there. We are getting into more of a small scale production. And the reason for that is there's something called the Valley of Death with startups, especially in food and beverage. And so they're too small to be able to to fund their own equipment and their own facilities, but they may be too small also for what we call a co-packer, where there's an established food company that may want to co-pack their products. And so we're doing this small scale production at the pilot plant, but the whole food science and the Food Venture Center is heavily involved with helping companies meet safety compliance, regulatory concerns, testing to make sure that their processing is on target and is addressing pathogens in food, for example. So we have so many different facilities, the Craft Beverage Institute. I could go on, but we have really state-of-the-art, very compelling resources that are very cost-effective for startups and existing food, beverage, and agriculture-related companies, in addition to helping growers and farmers.
Great. Thank you very much. Ted, tell us about your Halo Film product and how you hope it might impact the food industry.
So let me just give you a little background. A thing that most people are not aware is that disinfectants and cleaners and sanitizers, when you spray them on, usually the active ingredient that's in those products doesn't last for very long, generally less than 15 minutes and certainly not for an hour. So imagine if your sunscreen only lasted for 15 minutes or your deodorant. So you can see that there's room there for something that lasts longer, that'll fight pathogens on surfaces continuously. And so that's what Halo Film is. Essentially, it's a new product category. We call it a chlorine extender. So chlorine is a fabulous biocide. We've been using it in our drinking water, in our pools. We use it in our laundry. It's everywhere and it's excellent, but it evaporates fairly quickly. So what we're doing is taking that core technology and enabling you to hold chlorine on a surface at the same level that you'd find in a swimming pool in a safe and effective manner. So it comes as a spray, you spray it on, you let it dry, it leaves behind a thin transparent film that sticks both to the surface and to chlorine. And so it doesn't wipe off easily, but if a pathogens from bacteria, fungi, or virus land on that surface, the chlorine will dissipate into the pathogens, killing them.
I see.
So we have third-party data that we can deter mold for 30 days. We can kill bacteria in less than 10 minutes, and we can achieve a 1 log reduction in a virus in about 30 minutes. So that's the core concept of the product. Where we see its use, there's sort of there's 3 areas and 2 values. The first area would be sort of harvesting, when you first collect the food, and then you process the food, and then you sort of serve the food. So there's harvesting, processing, and food prep. And so on the harvest side, as much as 10% of all produce is lost to mold. So if we could make sure that we eliminate mold as much as we can, coating all the surfaces in a cold room or a harvest collection facility with chlorine to reduce the amount of mold that's in the air and around that plant, that should save some level of actual product. And so product yield is the first value. And then in the food processing and food prep areas, mostly we're talking about food safety, where we reduce the pathogen load, avoid some foodborne pathogen illness that kill about 3,000 people a year and cost tens of millions of dollars in damage to individual processors. So those are the sort of value propositions and where we see the product being used.
If there are traces of the Halo Film product on the actual produce itself, fruits and vegetables in particular, is it food grade? Is it safe?
So we absolutely expect to have the FDA approval for food contact surfaces. The polymer does not migrate. So essentially the film is a polymer. But it's only 100 nanometers thick. We're talking about a very, very small amount. And so it doesn't migrate off of surfaces. So it'll be so low, we won't even have to submit data to the FDA because it won't enter the food supply sufficiently enough. And even if it was accidentally sprayed onto produce and you ate it, it's plastics pass through our system all the time. There's nothing toxic about it. Chlorine is used in organic farming. It's approved by the USDA's organic, I forget the acronym, but for use as a pesticide and disinfectant. And so Essentially, all we're doing is enabling to improve the use of chlorine by holding it on surfaces for longer.
Great. Your innovations have other potential applications in military and medical industries. What are those, and what resources are you using to understand those particular markets?
We actually have a number, as you can imagine, an antimicrobial material has a number of different applications. We're looking at food is a big one, what we call professional, which would be mass transit, schools, jails, things like that. Healthcare facilities like hospitals and nursing homes, and then consumer are the 4 areas there. We've been blessed to be really good at writing grants. So we have 2 NSF grants focused on a variety of applications, an NIH grant focused on hospitals, and we're in our USDA phase 2 to focus on food applications. But then we also have a phase 1 from the DoD, because it turns out if you spray this on a cotton bandage, you can turn that bandage into an antimicrobial, and we've changed the formulation a little, so it's an antimicrobial, anti-adhesive advanced wound dressing. And that's of interest to the military.
Wow. So in what way have you partnered with the Center of Excellence in Food and Ag to develop this product and advance your company?
So we have had more minimal need for equipment and sort of technical resources, I think, that Selma described. What has really been absolutely beneficial to us is the connections that we've been able to make with other people through the center. And so quite honestly, we were getting ready to apply for our phase 2 with the USDA, and we were short a support letter. Support letter is incredibly important to support your case. The pandemic hit, which meant it was hard to go talk to people, and not everybody knew what Zoom was yet. And so we needed to apply, and we put out the call, and the center delivered an excellent letter of support for us that helped us get that award. Right. So that was very tangible.
I'm actually going to dig into a couple of the first 2 of our Q&A questions, and I'm going to pose them to Selma. So Selma, PFAS found in both ground and well water.
The short answer is yes, they can be found in the well and groundwater, and not all of them, but it has been shown, investigations have shown if you have a military training activity nearby, it's highly likely that your well will be contaminated, because PFAS, they're fire suppressant. So anywhere you have military training activities, they put something on fire, they put the fire out, that PFAS actually goes into the groundwater, and it's highly likely to contaminate your well. And this is really no surprise.
Got it. Does touching PFAS related products leach into the skin?
I'm not quite sure that I should be answering. I don't have expertise, but just knowing that skin is a live organ, and everything you put on the skin actually goes into your bloodstream, I would guess yes. But again, I would like to fence myself that I don't have the expertise.
So just so everyone in the group knows, Selma provided a disclaimer that this is not her area of expertise, but she gave you her well-informed opinion, okay?
Well, right. Jason, just to add, we certainly, when we deal with PFAS in the lab, we have to wear gloves. We can't just touch it, right? And people actually in the pond working, there's this great movie, Dark Waters, with Mark Ruffalo, that explains the PFAS problem. So if anybody's interested, they should see that movie. But the stories that actually came out said, people working long-term with PFAS have developed all sorts of cancers.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I'm just going to, end that there.
She is absolutely correct. I'm originally from West Virginia, where a lot of those stories came from those chemical plants. So yes, that's valid for sure, and a good film. So to Stefan, how does your work support New York State's food, beverage, and ag industries?
So I guess the commonality is that everybody needs clean water, right? So those industries need clean water. And so if we have technologies, or we develop, or we are the conduit to develop new technologies to treat water, such as Selma's process, where we removing PFAS, or we're removing nutrients that will benefit the agricultural industry, that will end the food industry, because they need clean resources to work with. In addition, you can think about the tourism industry, right? So you want lakes and to be pristine so people can use them for tourism attractions. So we don't want algae blooms on those lakes which prevent people from swimming. So I think that's kind of where the healthy water system can ultimately, a solutions center can help develop those technologies to assist, to preserve those resources.
Great. And you actually answered my follow-up question by naming tourism as another industry that would directly benefit from this type of work. Catherine, from the Q&A, you mentioned that consumer trends are shifting toward local food. What barriers, whether they be market-based or policy-based, are there to relocalizing our food supply chains, specifically in rural upstate New York?
Well, we need to make sure that we're supporting our local farmers and growers, and that's what Cornell does through the different innovation and research and technology that we put out there to help our growers and processors become more efficient, more productive. And so we're working heavily in that space. And we're also making a lot of connections between locally sourced food and these food and beverage companies that we're working with. And so that they can access locally what's being produced in New York State. It is very important to consumers. I just saw from that SNAP poll that you just did that fewer preservatives was the area of interest to most of the viewers today. And we're helping our food producers be able to produce these products that have fewer preservatives. For example, we have the high pressure processing testing facility. It's the only one of its kind in the entire country. And it is a big machine that applies water pressure to package flexibly packaged products. The water pressure is greater than what is in the Marianas Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean, but it helps address issues such as listeria, salmonella, other contaminants that get into food products, extend shelf life. And so it's just a way to reduce that preservative load that oftentimes we see in food products. So that's a real resource. They do validation studies, shelf life studies for microbiological and physiochemical analyses. And so we're very proud of that resource that we have in New York. But, we see that we need to continue to grow the ag industry. You pointed out at the beginning of the session how important it is to our economic health and vitality in New York State with all the food processing companies. Didn't talk much about the craft beverage industry, but we have wineries, distilleries, craft breweries, cideries, now hard seltzers coming on. We're a resource for them. So there's so many opportunities out there, and we're just working through Cornell to help people grab onto those.
To what extent do you see, for farmers, intermediated sales opportunities to processors, to distributors, other wholesalers, as sort of the key to their economic vitality and growth into the future versus the direct-to-consumer market channels like farmers markets?
But some of the sectors of agriculture, for example, have been struggling. Dairy prices have been very low. We saw a lot of milk dumping during the beginning of the pandemic. Cornell was there to help address these issues and get these food products out into the supply chain, whether it was getting food to nutrition, food pantries, things like that, making those connections. It was very important, but we're helping farmers and growers diversify what they offer too. So one big project we're working on is a hops and grains project with a focus on bakery ingredients, beer ingredients. But I think dairy farmers, for example, need to diversify their bottom lines. And so growing hops, there's a way that you can come up with a fully integrated model that takes away a lot of the costs that go directly back on the farmers and growers. and make it more cost efficient and make it appealing to them so that they can have more of a cushion. You know, there's a saying, not to have a pun, but don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? But if you can diversify your bottom lines, it's going to make sure that our agriculture industry continues to be healthy and thriving.
Great. Let me remind our participants to please use the Q&A. We have, there we go. Good. So this is to Ted, and actually Ted and Catherine, I'll sort of ask you a joint question, and that is, to what extent might the Halo Film project be useful for people in the food sector meeting the parameters of the Food Safety Modernization Act?
Catherine, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can go. So the Food Safety Modernization Act was actually put in place by the federal government in 2011. It took until about 2015 for them to develop all the guidelines and how this would be implemented. But it's a big issue because about 48 million people get sick from foodborne illnesses every single year, and so that's about 1 in 6 people. 128,000 people in the US are hospitalized, and actually there are about 3,000 deaths every year because of foodborne illnesses. So this is something that needed to be tackled. We have the Institute for Food Safety at Cornell, and we work across lines, so in the dairy industry, in the food and vegetable, the processing industry, and we help companies and growers be able to meet the Food Safety Modernization Act. So Dr. Betsy Bin, for example, helps train New York State Agriculture and Markets food inspectors. And so we provide that service, but we help get this guidance out into the marketplace to address food safety issues. And so somebody like Ted and Halamine is crucial to that. And I know Ted has worked with, for example, Dr. Bruno Xavier in our food science program, but food processors, and we, through the Center of Excellence, we help put Halamine in touch with, a major food processor, for example, because that food safety component is so key. And technologies such as TED's is, I think, going to help transform the industry to make sure that the requirements of the Food Modernization Safety Act are met and that we can continue to produce and process food in a very safe way. I don't know, Ted, you want to add on to that?
So there's a lot that goes on in a food processor's life related to the Modernization Act. There's a lot of regulation and expectations of when they're going to test and how they test and what happens when they test. And so, as you can imagine, there's all sorts of sometimes weird incentives that are set up. The goal would be for the problems in food processing plants include incidental transmission. So pathogens coming from someplace and making it to food. And then the other aspect really is biofilm development. Is once a pathogen gets established, it creates a biofilm which makes it impervious to removal. And so both of those sort of problems can be addressed if your surfaces have a continuous layer of some sort of biocidal activity to make them antimicrobial. You'll get less incidental transmission, even from the workers that come in that bring it with them, but really the biggest problem are the forklift trucks that have to move things around and go outside and come back in. So it's in the air and it's moving, from one place to another, and they try really hard to do their best. But if you can cover the walls and make sure that really pathogens don't have a chance to get started, if they have incidental contact, you'd be better off, which is part of our big value proposition. It's insurance. It should mitigate the likelihood that you get a biofilm, and it should mitigate the possibility that you have anything that can start a biofilm.
Got it.
Yeah,
So
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Well, just to piggyback on, some of the different emerging technologies. So you have halamines. On top of it, there are different initiatives such as blockchain, which Cornell is a leader in blockchain, a global leader. We have experts on the Ithaca campus, but also our IC3, the Initiative for Cryptocurrencies and Contracts. But blockchain is being used by retailers and consumers to track the origins of their food products from field to consumption. And so, for example, IBM and Walmart are exploring blockchain for supply chain monitoring. You hear sometimes about outbreaks of foodborne disease from spinach or lettuce, things like that. And when you can trace the entire food throughout the entire chain, this can help immensely in tracking that foodborne contamination where it comes from. So there are a lot of different initiatives out there. One of the Grow New York finalists is Ripe.io, and that's a startup that is using blockchain in the food industry, and they want to provide a platform that provides access to transparent and reliable information on the origin, journey, and quality of people's food. So, but we're very proud of what Halomine has done, because I think, if you look at the environment and making sure that it's sanitized and safe, they are really leaders in that whole effort.
Great.
We're also a finalist in Grow New York this year, just so you know.
For you.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. Sorry.
Okay.
Congratulations.
You're mentioning everybody else.
For you to say it.
That's right. There you go. I said it.
You said it. Yay.
Ted, is it safe to say then that you see food as sort of your quickest track to market, and that breaks down barriers into other industries?
So that was the concept initially, that with pre-pandemic, food was the leader. Dr. Mingyu Chao, the inventor of Halo Film, has a food safety background. So it was something that we were comfortable with and we were aware of. And so it's a fairly easy space to get into.
Yeah.
We've added as a first tier, there's a whole lot of disinfecting going on, as you know, in all sorts of different environments. And so we're also targeting those. Not all of those have long-term implications. Hopefully once this pandemic is over, we can go back to normal levels. But even then, there's still some applications like schools that I think are always going to have some interest. And healthcare has a number of requirements, and we don't need FDA approval or anything like that, but there are a number of requirements before we can really break into the healthcare market.
Sure.
So food is early on our list.
There's a whole lot of disinfecting going on. Sounds like the lyrics to a song.
Yes, there you go.
Ted, a little more specific question really quick. Is Halo Film potentially a substitute for Lysol in particular, or simply an extender of a product like Lysol?
So I think it matters which particular. So there's a lot that goes on about disinfecting and cleaning that most people know nothing about. And so Lysol has probably 100 product variations, and not all of them actually use the same technology behind them.
I see.
So I can tell you the Lysol Daily Cleaner has hypochlorous acid, and that will get charged or will donate chlorine to Halo Film. So you could use it.
Okay.
Now, it depends on the situation. In food and in healthcare, more is better. So people want to do more to prevent potential infection. Now, in other applications, like mass transit, right now they're disinfecting, but they'd love to stop. And so if you said, hey, tell you what, I can extend the lifetime of your disinfectant, make it last twice as long, and you have the same level of protection, they will do less cleaning. Because the biggest part of disinfecting and cleaning is the time of the person that has to spray it on, not the cost of the disinfectant or cleaner.
I see.
So there's sort of two value propositions we hear: extra protection or reduction in labor time, which means reduction in cost to achieve the same level of disinfecting.
I see. Can it be used, Halo Film, on inner and or outer surfaces of masks effectively to kill virus, flu transmission, things like that?
So I will use Selma's approach here. It gets a little dicey for me to talk about masks, which are medical devices. We are looking at that, but we are very, very careful about what we say.
Sure.
And the balance of that is, yes, halofilm can work on hard non-porous surfaces, but it can also work on soft surfaces and porous surfaces. Porous surfaces are cloth. So yes, we make an advanced wound dressing, so absolutely it's going to do something,
Okay.
and actually be pretty good. But it's one thing to put a wound dressing on your leg, and we pour chlorine solutions into burn wounds to clean them. It's another thing to breathe through it, and what the tolerance is for even a mild smell of chlorine for somebody to wear it in the mask. So we're really a little careful about that, but yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Good. To Selma and Stefan, whichever wants to take it, it seems like the technology has advanced pretty far in order to, for addressing issues like PFAS and nutrient loading in bodies of water. What's the frontier, though? What platform technology isn't quite here that might ultimately be that would allow us to address these issues even more effectively, efficaciously?
I'll let Stefan respond.
So I guess if I understand the question right, I think I would say we need to, for nutrient management, for example, we need to, especially from those non-point source pollution, we need to come up with low-cost technologies. We need to come up with sensor technologies which allow us to identify where pollution occurs. So there's a startup company in Syracuse which starts with drone technology, which identifies algae blooms, for example. So connecting the treatment with the sensing technology ultimately makes smart remediation technologies. I think that's really the frontier, what has to happen. I think we need to combine these different levels of innovations together to make smart treatment technologies. Otherwise, the treatment of those, you can't treat entire lakes. It's too cost prohibitive. And so we need to be very smart in where we focus our efforts. And I think that's really needs to be the frontier, linking those technologies. Yeah.
Good. I did have a question come in about agriculture that probably best suited for Catherine, but anybody can jump in. There's an image, of course, of agriculture being very quote unquote salt of the earth. Has it been difficult to get advanced technologies adopted in the industry? And I'm assuming the questioner is primarily referring to primary producers at the farm level.
Yeah, I think sometimes it may have been, but if you can prove to a farmer or grower that it's going to save them time and money and make them more productive, then I do think that they'll grab onto it. A university like Cornell has a lot of credibility in the industry. And so as these technologies are being developed and this research is being conducted, people are grabbing onto it. We have assets such as Cornell Cooperative Extension that are literally out in the fields working with growers and farmers every single day, and they can help introduce these new ways of doing things. So there is this whole infrastructure that exists. Oftentimes, leaders in an industry, so say there is a grower or a farmer that seems to be an early adopter of technologies. Oftentimes, companies will work with them to get them to utilize it. And then other farmers and growers say, hey, this person is using this, look at how successful they're able to be in whatever manner. And so I'm going to grab onto this too. So there is a whole process that you need to go through, but there's so many exciting things out there. We have Dr. David Gaduri, for example, that is addressing powdery mildew. I get it in my home garden every year, right? But he's using UV light, short bursts at night that control powdery mildew without using fungicides and other chemical means. And so we're figuring out a way to get that out into the marketplace so that growers have access to that kind of technology. And how do we, outfit farm implements, for example, for them to be able to utilize it for different crops. And so those are some of the exciting things. And if growers can tackle that whole issue and save money on chemical treatments, and consumers are happier because of that, then, you know, we can get that kind of technology, you know, mainstream, hopefully.
Great. Well, we have about 4 minutes, and I wanted to leave that time for some closing remarks. And it's purely voluntary. So if any of the panelists would like to make a closing remark about whatever you would like, what's coming next for your center, what's coming next in your research, what are you excited about, anything that you would like to say, but you have about a minute each to say it. So Ted, any last words to offer?
The question I always get is, when is it going to be available? And
good. Yeah.
Just to be clear, we were hoping to be able to start selling product by the end of this year. I think it will be more like January. Okay. So we have a website that is not clear about that. It's sort of a marketing tool. But if anybody is terribly interested, we're looking at a rollout really in early next year.
Great. Stefan?
Yeah, so while we focused, while our center is pretty small at this point, we focused only on a few key issues in water resource management. Essentially, we have a lot of more expertise in managing big watersheds, looking at sensing technologies, looking at wastewater and water treatment technologies. So I think there is a lot of expertise within the center between ESF and Clarkson. And so I think it should be a great resource for anybody in the industry to ultimately develop their technologies and help, and we can help them create, I think, an environment that have a profitable technology. So I think that's
great. Selma?
Sure. Yeah, I want to kind of just say a general comment regarding water treatment and maybe perhaps future water treatment. I don't believe there is one single technology that's going to be, you know, the holy grail of water treatment. Oh, we have developed this plasma reactor, now we are done with water treatment. Highly likely, you know, the future water treatment will involve multiple steps and technologies being, you know, arranged in a treatment train, each one with its own specific purpose. And we're hoping that our plasma reactor is going to be part of that treatment train that specifically targets PFAS. But again, all technologies working together to achieve one goal, clean water.
Great. And finally, Catherine.
You know, I just would encourage entrepreneurs, whether you're in food, beverage, or agriculture, to reach out to our Center of Excellence. We've got a lot of assets and we're developing an entire ecosystem. So not only do we have the Cornell Research and Technology, but in addition, we have opportunities such as Business Incubator at the Cornell Food and Agriculture and Food Technology Park. We're developing more food and beverage manufacturing there. We'll have opportunities for companies to co-locate at Agritech through the Center of Excellence with laboratory space. So not only will startups be able to have better access to the pilot plant, for example, but our large existing food, beverage, and agriculture related companies will be able to co-locate and you know, be able to access that research and innovation at Cornell. That'll be available this coming year, and we're very excited about that and look forward to continuing to grow the food, beverage, and agriculture industry in New York State.
Great. We do have a comment from the crowd. Just thanks to all of our panelists. A great talk, and they're looking forward to the Halo product coming onto the market. I'll also extend my thanks to the panel. This was incredibly enlightening for me. I learned a lot, and I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to moderate the talk. So for everyone participating, the session has been recorded and it will be provided to you in a post-event email. So from our entire panel, thank you for joining and enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.